Imagine suffering a neurological event so severe that it paralyzes your dominant hand.
Right. Which is just terrifying.
Oh, absolutely. Instantly threatening your livelihood. Or, on an even more existential level, living with a virus that has just systematically dismantled your immune system
Yeah.
to the point of a terminal diagnosis.
Yeah.
What if the catalyst for navigating both of these completely different, totally terrifying medical scenarios was a dusty $4 bottle of a basic mineral sitting ignored on the bottom shelf of a local pharmacy?
I mean, it sounds like the setup for a late-night infomercial, honestly.
It really does.
It challenges our entire modern conception of how profound medical interventions are supposed to work. Because we are so conditioned to expect, high-tech, highly expensive, highly targeted pharmaceuticals to solve complex crises.
Exactly. We expect the $1 million lab, not the generic white bottle.
Right.
But today we're taking a deep dive into a deeply personal, remarkably expansive set of anecdotal experiences that really forces us to look at that $4 bottle. We're working with a source transcript today from a YouTube video created by a man named Osman,
Yes.
and he goes by the moniker The Blind Muslim Yogi. His video is simply titled, My Positive Experience with Selenium.
It's such an understated title, too. It really belies the intensity of what he actually discusses, because we aren't just looking at a quick review of a daily vitamin here.
No, not at all.
We are unpacking a narrative that spans continents, it crosses decades, and it touches on some of the most complex biological systems in the human body. I mean, we're talking immunology, neurology, and cardiovascular health.
And before we get into the biochemistry of literally any of this, we need to draw a very hard line regarding the framework of this deep dive.
Absolutely.
Because Osman shares some staggering claims in this video, but he frames them, and we are analyzing them, strictly through the lens of one person's lived anecdotal experience.
Which is such a crucial epistemological distinction for you listening. We are exploring the intersection of personal belief, observational self-experimentation, and biological plausibility.
Right.
We are definitely not evaluating double-blind, peer-reviewed clinical trials today. And to Osman's credit, he places this massive, unambiguous disclaimer right at the beginning of his material.
He does. He directs people to his platform, yogawellness786.com, but he explicitly states that his advice and his natural remedies are strictly for complementary lifestyle enhancement.
Yes.
He makes it completely 100% clear that nothing he says is a replacement for consulting a licensed medical professional. If you are sick, you go to a doctor, period.
And that grounded approach is exactly what makes his narrative worth dissecting. He isn't asking his audience to just abandon conventional medicine.
Not at all.
He's asking them to explore what happens when you attempt to optimize the biological environment alongside that conventional medicine. And to understand how he arrives at this philosophy, we really have to look at the unique position he occupies in the wellness space.
So let's look at the messenger for a second. Osman introduces himself in the text as an energy healer, a yoga and meditation teacher, and an entrepreneur.
Right.
He's running this platform, offering daily discussions and services, but it's the stated mission of his practice that really stands out to me. He claims his goal is to combine the latest modern science discoveries with ancient arts and natural remedies.
It's an ambitious synthesis, and if you look at the broader landscape of modern healthcare and wellness right now, you can see exactly why this specific dual approach resonates so deeply with people.
Yeah.
We are living in an era of profound medical polarization.
People definitely feel like they are forced into camps these days. Like you are either entirely reliant on the clinical allopathic medical system, or you are entirely off the grid, relying only on alternative modalities.
Precisely.
Oh.
And both of those extremes present massive psychological and practical hurdles. On one hand, pure clinical science is undeniably the most effective tool we have for acute crises. But the patient experience within that system can often feel deeply, deeply alienating. It is highly compartmentalized.
Oh, yeah. You see a specialist for your heart, completely different one for your nerve, a different one for your mind.
Exactly. The system rarely has the bandwidth to address the holistic environment of the patient. I mean, they aren't looking at your stress, your lifestyle, or your nutritional baseline.
It can really feel like you're just a collection of symptoms on a chart rather than a whole human being.
It really can. Now, swing the pendulum to the other extreme. The purely alternative or ancient art space offers that holistic focus. It provides immense emotional support, time, and attention to the individual's subjective experience.
Right, which is so comforting.
But it frequently lacks the rigorous, measurable efficacy and the physiological interventions required to stop really aggressive pathologies.
So Osman is attempting to basically stand right in the middle. He's taking the holistic environmental approach of a yoga teacher and an energy healer, but he's aiming it at things like trace minerals, actual elements on the periodic table, and explicitly telling his audience to keep taking their prescribed medications.
He is offering a framework of optimization rather than replacement.
Yeah.
And from a psychological standpoint, this dramatically lowers the barrier to entry for a skeptical but curious audience.
That makes a lot of sense.
When someone is navigating a chronic illness, they are often desperate for additional support, but they are terrified of making a dangerous mistake.
Right, they don't want to mess up their actual treatment.
Exactly. By constantly validating the necessity of the medical establishment, Osman creates a psychologically safe environment. He allows people to explore natural enhancements without triggering the anxiety that they are acting irresponsibly or, abandoning science.
It gives you permission to be curious. And that curiosity is exactly what drives the catalyst for this entire deep dive. Because Osman's own belief in this specific supplement, selenium, didn't start in a laboratory or an ashram.
No, it didn't.
It started with a completely random encounter thousands of miles away.
Yeah, we transition here to a very vivid physical setting in the source material. Osman recounts a memory from his home country of South Africa.
He paints this really clear picture of himself in a pharmacy owned by a close friend, and they're having one of their usual deep, engaging conversations about health. I want to pause on that setting for a moment, actually.
Sure.
Because a pharmacy in this context isn't just a sterile retail transaction where you grab a bottle and swipe a credit card. It's functioning as a community hub. It's a place of actual medical discourse.
That's a vital piece of the cultural context. In many parts of the world, local pharmacies serve as the primary and sometimes only accessible point of health triage and intellectual exchange regarding wellness.
Yeah, the pharmacist is a trusted community figure.
Exactly. It's a highly fertile environment for the transmission of anecdotal health information.
And into this fertile environment walks a complete stranger, an American visitor who is essentially operating as a one-man global advocacy group.
Which is wild.
It is. Osman notes that this visitor is spending his own money and his own time traveling to pharmacies, getting on local radio stations, appearing on talk shows, all with a single, highly specific mission.
And that mission is to promote the consumption of selenium.
Right. And he's doing this because of the narrative he carries with him, a claim of profound personal survival. According to Osman's transcript, this American man stated that he was HIV positive and that his condition had progressed to full-blown AIDS.
And Osman specifically notes this as the stage where illnesses become deeply serious and recovery is incredibly rare.
Okay, I need to push back hard here, because we are looking at a claim that an American visitor survived full-blown AIDS. And Osman says the man claimed he had been living AIDS-free for 19 years, and he is attributing this recovery to a basic mineral supplement. Medically speaking, that sounds dangerously close to the kind of pseudoscience that cost a lot of people their lives. How are we supposed to interpret a claim that bold within the context of this video?
That is exactly the right skepticism to bring to this.
Yeah.
Let's dissect the claim, not to validate it as a clinical cure, because it's not, but to understand its biological plausibility as an adjuvant and to understand why it was so persuasive to Osman.
Okay.
First, we have to look at the timeline. If this man has been surviving for 19 years, depending on exactly when this encounter in South Africa took place, his initial diagnosis likely falls squarely in the early to mid-1990s.
Which was an incredibly dark period for HIV and AIDS.
Yeah.
Highly active antiretroviral therapy, or HAART, wasn't widely introduced until around 1996.
Exactly. A diagnosis progressing to AIDS before that era was almost universally a terminal trajectory. The virus systematically destroys the CD4 cells, leaving the body defenseless against opportunistic infections.
Oh.
Now, does selenium cure HIV? No. Absolutely not. The scientific consensus is definitive on that. But does selenium play a fascinating documented role in the immunology of viral infections, including HIV? Yes, it does.
Okay, break that down for me. What is the actual mechanism there? Why would a trace mineral have any interaction with a complex retrovirus?
It comes down to oxidative stress and viral replication.
Okay.
When a virus like HIV attacks a host cell, it creates a massive amount of oxidative stress, essentially chemical chaos caused by free radicals that damage cellular structures. HIV actually utilizes this oxidative stress to accelerate its own replication.
Right.
It thrives in that chaotic chemical environment.
So the virus is basically pouring gasoline on the cellular fire to spread faster.
Precisely. Now, how does the human body fight oxidative stress? It uses antioxidants, but not just the antioxidants you eat, like vitamin C.
Right.
The body manufactures its own incredibly powerful antioxidant enzymes, the most crucial of what is called glutathione peroxidase. This enzyme is the body's primary fire extinguisher for cellular inflammation.
And let me guess, selenium is involved in making that fire extinguisher.
Selenium is the fundamental building block. Glutathione peroxidase is a selenoprotein. Without adequate selenium in your system, your body literally cannot manufacture this enzyme.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and what research in the late 90s and early 2000s began to show was that HIV rapidly depletes the body's selenium levels. The virus drains the very mineral the body needs to protect its cells.
That's insidious.
It is. In fact, severe selenium deficiency in HIV patients was found to be an independent predictor of mortality, regardless of their CD4 count.
Wait, really? So if your selenium bottoms out, your body's internal fire extinguishers go offline, oxidative stress skyrockets, and the virus just replicates completely unchecked.
Exactly. So while selenium is not an antiviral drug, replenishing a severe selenium deficiency in a compromised immune system can theoretically give the body back its tools to manage the oxidative damage. It stabilizes the cellular environment.
Okay, so looking at the American visitor's story through that biological lens, it's highly probable that he eventually got on to antiretroviral medications to suppress the virus, which is what actually kept him alive for 19 years.
Yes.
But in his mind, adding selenium was the turning point that stabilized his spiraling immune system.
That is the most medically plausible interpretation. But from the visitor's subjective perspective, the supplement was the magic bullet. And this brings us to the psychology of what we might call a health missionary.
I like that.
Think about the profound survivor's guilt and existential whiplash of staring down a terminal AIDS diagnosis in the 90s, preparing to die, and then miraculously surviving for nearly 2 decades.
It completely rewrites your reality.
It has to. And if you attribute that survival, even in part, to a specific intervention that you feel the broader medical community is ignoring, you develop an overwhelming moral imperative to share it.
Right, you have to tell people.
Exactly. The fact that selenium is cheap and unpatented only fuels this conviction. He isn't traveling to South Africa to get rich. He's doing it because he genuinely believes he holds a secret to survival. It becomes a crusade.
And he brought proof of his crusade with him to the pharmacy. The transcript mentions a very specific, almost bizarre detail.
Yeah.
Osman notes that the visitor carried a photograph of himself standing with former U.S. President Bill Clinton. And he used this photo to show Osman and the pharmacist. I mean, why rely on a photo with a politician when you're trying to make a medical claim?
It's a fascinating tactic of persuasion. Imagine the dynamics of the room. You are a stranger in a foreign pharmacy making an astronomical claim about surviving a lethal disease for 2 decades using a mineral.
Yeah, people are going to think you're crazy.
Exactly. The immediate natural reaction of any intelligent person is deep skepticism. You need a shortcut to bypass that skepticism.
You need to prove you aren't just unhinged.
Right. In the realm of anecdotal health advocacy, authority is often borrowed. The photograph with Bill Clinton is an artifact of legitimacy. It doesn't prove anything about selenium's efficacy.
No, of course not.
But what it signals to Osman and the pharmacist is, my story is real enough, my survival has been documented enough, and my advocacy has reached a high enough level that I have stood next to the President of the United States.
It's visual shorthand. It forces the listener to just pause their judgment. Like, if the president gave this guy 5 minutes of his time, maybe I should give him 5 minutes of mine.
Exactly. And before the modern era of algorithms and viral social media videos, this grassroots, deeply physical method of advocacy was how alternative health information propagated.
Yeah, there is a palpable weight to a human being physically crossing oceans, walking into your local pharmacy, looking you in the eye, and showing you a photograph of their 19-year survival.
Osman clearly felt that weight. In the text, he explicitly states that having met him personally and in discussing this personally, they really felt the impact of it. The sheer conviction of this American stranger resonated so deeply that it pushed Osman to turn the lens inward.
It shifts the narrative from observational awe to experimental action. Osman decides to test this mineral on his own physiology.
Which brings us to the second major narrative in this source text, Osman's own personal trial. In the transcript, he outlines his medical baseline at the time of this encounter.
Right. He tells the audience he had a history of diabetes, and he was suffering from a mild form of neuropathy.
Neuropathy is a notoriously complex and frustrating condition, particularly in the context of diabetes. We are talking about peripheral nerve damage.
Break down the mechanics of that for me. Because we hear the word neuropathy a lot in commercials, but what is actually happening inside Osman's body that is causing this?
To understand diabetic neuropathy, you have to look at the vascular system. Nerves are living tissue. They require oxygen and nutrients to survive, and they get those from incredibly tiny blood vessels called capillaries. When a person has diabetes, chronically elevated blood sugar levels act almost like microscopic shards of glass flowing through the bloodstream. Over time, this high glucose environment severely damages those tiny capillaries.
So the supply lines to the nerves are basically being destroyed.
Precisely. The nerves are essentially being starved of oxygen. But it gets worse. That high glucose environment also triggers, just like we discussed with the viral infection, massive oxidative stress.
Oh, wow. The oxidative stress again.
Exactly. And this oxidative stress directly attacks the myelin sheath, which is the protective coating around the nerve fibers.
Like the rubber insulation on an electrical wire.
That's the perfect analogy. If you strip the rubber insulation off an electrical wire, the signal shorts out, it sparks. In the human body, when the myelin sheath is damaged, the electrical signals misfire.
Which feels like what?
This manifests as tingling, burning pain, or eventually complete numbness, typically starting in the extremities, like the feet and hands. For someone like Osman, whose life and profession involved the physical precision of yoga, losing sensation or experiencing chronic pain in his extremities would be existentially threatening.
I can't even imagine. So he is dealing with this deteriorating nervous system. And I want to highlight, once again, his methodology here. He states, quote, "I, of course, tried to follow all the doctor's prescriptions and medications and following the lifestyle habits."
Yes.
He is doing everything by the book. He isn't rejecting his diabetes medication. But inspired by the American, he decides to introduce a single new variable.
He introduces a daily selenium supplement, but the way he goes about it reveals a highly disciplined, analytical mindset. He doesn't just swallow a random handful of pills.
Yeah.
He establishes a strict protocol, 50 micrograms a day, every day, for 6 months.
I am fascinated by that timeline, because 6 months is an eternity in the world of modern supplementation. Most of us take a new vitamin for 2 weeks, decide we don't feel like an Olympic athlete, and throw the bottle in the trash.
That impatience stems from a fundamental misunderstanding of cellular biology. The nervous system is notoriously slow to heal. If you are trying to repair damaged myelin sheath and restore microvasculature, you simply cannot rush it.
Right.
It's like trying to regrow a forest. You can't just yell at the trees to grow faster. By committing to a 6-month trial, Osman is demonstrating a fundamental respect for the biological pace of healing. He is giving the body time to utilize the new raw materials.
And the logistics of getting those raw materials were surprisingly difficult, which he mentions. Osman points out a really interesting hurdle in the text.
Yeah, the dosage issue.
Right. He says the recommended dose he wanted was 50 micrograms, which he calls microunits. But he notes that when you go to a pharmacy, selenium is usually sold in much larger doses, like 100 or 200 units.
Which implies a level of daily friction. To hit his precise 50 microgram protocol, he likely had to manually split tiny pills every single morning.
It just proves this wasn't a casual whim. He had to physically work for that specific dose for 180 days. And then Osman brings up the economics of the supplement, which challenges a huge bias we all have.
It really does.
He says selenium is one of the cheapest supplements you will find in any pharmacy. He actually issues this almost conspiratorial warning. He says that if people really knew its powerful effects, the price would dramatically increase.
Right. He notes that you can buy a bottle of 100 tablets for a very low cost. And because he was only taking half a tablet a day to hit his 50 microgram dose, that single, incredibly cheap bottle lasts him over 6 months.
It completely upends how we value healthcare interventions. We are so conditioned by consumerism to believe that price correlates directly with efficacy.
It's a profound cognitive bias. If a luxury wellness clinic offers a proprietary branded intravenous strip for $1,000, our brains instinctively categorize it as a potent, serious medical intervention.
Yeah, we assume the cost reflects the science.
Exactly. But when we see a generic, dusty white bottle of a basic mineral for $4 on the bottom shelf of a pharmacy, our brains dismiss it. It lacks the aesthetic and financial signifiers of importance.
It's like finding out that the rust on your luxury car's engine can't be fixed by the $1,000 diagnostic software, but it can be fixed by a 50-cent wire brush you bought at a hardware store.
Yeah.
We want the flashy solution, not the basic element.
Right. But Osman's narrative strips away the marketing and looks purely at the mechanism. And the result of his trial, according to his claim, was profound.
He was.
The text states that after those 6 months of his 50 microgram daily dose, his mild neuropathy completely recovered. It reversed.
Now, I do appreciate that he includes a very honest caveat here.
Yeah.
He mentions that he did experience another attack of neuropathy about 10 years later.
Yes.
It wasn't a magical permanent shield that cured his diabetes forever, but for that specific bout, the reversal was complete.
And from an analytical perspective, what makes his anecdotal claim compelling is that he attempted to isolate the variable. He states in the transcript, "The only difference was in my adding the selenium on a daily basis."
The clinical medications are already there.
Exactly. The lifestyle habits were already there. The neuropathy was persisting despite those interventions. He added the selenium, kept everything else static, and observed a reversal. While not a clinical trial, it represents a highly logical self-experiment.
So if we look back at the biology of selenium we discussed earlier, the glutathione peroxidase and the reduction of oxidative stress, how does that apply to his fraying nerves?
Well, if the high blood sugar from his diabetes was causing massive oxidative stress that was destroying the myelin sheath around his nerves, supplementing with selenium would theoretically boost his body's ability to produce glutathione peroxidase.
Right.
That enzyme goes to work neutralizing the oxidative stress. It stops the chemical fire. Once the fire is out, the body finally has the breathing room to slowly repair the damaged myelin over that 6-month period.
It's fascinating. So he has the American story about the immune system, and now he has his own hard-won proof regarding his nervous system.
Yeah, his belief in the utility of this mineral is absolute at this point.
But as we move into the final narrative of the transcript, that belief is subjected to the ultimate test. It moves from managing a chronic, slow-moving condition to reacting to a sudden, catastrophic physical crisis.
Yes, the narrative pivots sharply here from the realm of optimization into the realm of acute trauma and grief.
The source text lays out a truly heartbreaking family dynamic. Osman shares that his family suffered a devastating loss. His younger brother passed away at just 39 years old.
The premature death of a sibling is a profound psychological shock.
And the collateral damage was massive. Osman details that his brother was married and left behind a 6-year-old child. Furthermore, the brother had lived his entire life in the same home as their mother.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So when he died suddenly, the mother, who was in her 60s at the time, was shattered. Osman says she was deeply attached to him all his life.
This is where we really have to look at the intersection of extreme emotional trauma and acute physiological breakdown. We often separate the mind and the body in our culture,
We do. We treat grief as a purely emotional state that you process through therapy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But biologically, grief is a violent physiological event.
I need to understand that connection.
Yeah.
How does emotional sadness translate into a physical crisis?
When a human being experiences a catastrophic loss, the brain interprets it as an existential threat. The amygdala sounds the alarm, and the sympathetic nervous system kicks into absolute overdrive.
Okay.
The body is flooded with stress hormones, primarily cortisol and adrenaline. In the short term, this is a survival mechanism. But when that state is sustained by profound, inescapable grief, those hormones become toxic.
They just start tearing the house down from the inside.
Exactly.
Mm.
Chronic high cortisol ravages the cardiovascular system. It drives up blood pressure, it increases systemic inflammation, and it can actually alter the coagulation cascade, making the blood more prone to clotting.
That sounds incredibly dangerous.
It is. There is a well-documented medical phenomenon often called broken heart syndrome, or Takotsubo cardiomyopathy, where severe emotional distress literally stuns the heart muscle. The physiological burden of grief is immense, especially for a woman in her 60s.
And her body couldn't withstand the burden. Osman tells us that as a direct result of this deep trauma, his mother suffered a mild stroke on her right side.
It's just tragic.
So this family is already drowning in the grief of losing a 39-year-old son and father. They're trying to care for a 6-year-old orphan, and right in the middle of it, the grandmother suffers a stroke. The compounding nature of the tragedy is just overwhelming.
And Osman highlights the immediate, terrifying practical stakes of this stroke. He notes that she was a teacher.
Right. The stroke hit her right side, and Osman says her hand just dropped. She completely lost the function of her hand. She couldn't grip a piece of chalk. She couldn't write on the chalkboard.
Wow.
And he explicitly states that this physical deficit was immediately threatening her job.
So we have a woman who has lost her son, who is thrust into a new caregiving dynamic for a traumatized grandchild, and who is now facing the imminent loss of her livelihood and physical autonomy. The stress on her system is compounding exponentially.
This brings up such a massive question about medical navigation. When you are in the absolute chaotic center of a family crisis like this, when someone is literally having a stroke, how do you reconcile Osman's philosophy of alternative supplementation?
Yeah, it's a huge test.
Who do you trust when the house is on fire?
You trust the fire department. And this is the most critical validation of Osman's approach in the entire transcript. In the face of a life-threatening acute emergency, there is zero hesitation or reliance on mysticism.
He states unequivocally, before doing that, of course, we went to the doctor.
They didn't try to treat an ischemic brain event with a vitamin.
Absolutely not. An acute stroke requires immediate, aggressive allopathic intervention. You need imaging to determine if it's ischemic or hemorrhagic. You need clot-busting drugs. You need blood pressure stabilization.
Right. Osman says they took the treatment and advice from the doctor and whatever he recommended. They submitted fully to the clinical establishment to save her life.
But once the immediate fire was put out, the structural damage remained. The doctors stabilized her, but she still couldn't use her hand. And this is where Osman steps in with his synthesized approach.
Yes.
Remembering the American visitor's immune recovery and remembering his own success in reversing his nerve damage, he looks at his mother's traumatized nervous system and recommends that, alongside her prescribed post-stroke medications, she adds selenium to her daily routine.
He is attempting to address the underlying environment that led to the stroke in the first place. The medical intervention cleared the acute blockage, but her body was still swimming in the toxic inflammatory soup of profound grief.
Is there actual biological logic to giving selenium to a stroke victim?
There is a compelling theoretical framework for it. A stroke causes a massive wave of ischemia, a lack of oxygen to brain tissue. When blood flow is eventually restored, it actually causes a secondary wave of damage called ischemia-reperfusion injury.
Okay.
And that injury generates an explosion of our old enemy, oxidative stress.
It always comes back to oxidative stress.
It does. The brain is highly vulnerable to oxidative damage. By introducing selenium, Osman is theoretically upregulating her glutathione peroxidase levels right when her brain desperately needs to clear out the chemical debris and reduce inflammation to allow neuroplasticity, the rewiring of the brain, to occur.
So he's basically trying to give her brain the absolute best possible environment to rebuild itself. And his claim regarding the timeline is quite aggressive. He states that within a few days, she started to feel better.
Now, any rigorous skeptic, myself included, has to point out that the clinical interventions, the blood thinners, the acute medical care, are the primary drivers of immediate post-stroke recovery. The doctor's treatment did the heavy lifting.
I completely agree with that. But Osman isn't just focused on those first few days. The true weight of this final story rests on the long-term outcome.
Exactly. The transcript notes that this tragic sequence of events occurred 10 to 15 years prior to him recording the video. His mother is now approaching 80 years old.
Yeah.
And the critical data point he leaves us with is this. In the decade and a half since that grief-induced stroke, she has never had another problem. She has never contracted another stroke. She has remained very healthy.
That is the detail that just stops you in your tracks. After suffering a stroke triggered by the kind of stress that doesn't just go away, she achieved 15 years of sustained cardiovascular health.
The recurrence rate for strokes is a massive medical challenge. The fact that she avoided a secondary event for 15 years while aging into her late 70s is a remarkable outcome.
It really is.
Osman attributes this sustained resilience, this long-term armor against the physiological wear and tear of aging and grief, to the continuous presence of selenium in her system.
It is the ultimate realization of his philosophy. The emergency room saved her life, but the $4 mineral, in his view, gave her the biological resilience to keep living it. It's not an either-or scenario.
Right.
It is a profound, deeply personal both-and.
It perfectly encapsulates the mission he stated at the beginning, utilizing modern scientific realities alongside accessible natural remedies to enhance and improve the human experience.
What an incredibly expansive journey we've been on today through this single video transcript. As we move to synthesize these findings, we have to look at the massive arc these stories create.
Yeah.
We start with the theoretical, a stranger walking into a South African pharmacy, claiming a 19-year survival from HIV and AIDS by utilizing a trace mineral to support his collapsing immune system.
A claim that, while not a clinical cure, points toward the fascinating biological reality of how viruses exploit oxidative stress and how our bodies require specific building blocks like selenium to manufacture our internal defenses.
Right. And we then watched that external claim catalyze an internal trial.
Osman's highly disciplined 6-month self-experiment, taking a specific 50 microgram daily dose to successfully reverse the myelin damage of diabetic neuropathy.
Proving to himself that healing requires patience, precise methodology, and a willingness to look past the modern bias that only expensive, branded interventions have value.
And finally, that belief was pressure tested in the crucible of a family tragedy. A brother's untimely death, a mother's physiology breaking down under the crushing weight of grief, resulting in a stroke that threatened her livelihood as a teacher.
Culminating in a perfect synthesis of acute allopathic medicine to save her life and a long-term, low-cost supplementation strategy that Osman credits with granting her 15 years of uninterrupted health.
It is essential to remember that we have been analyzing one man's anecdotal narrative today. We aren't prescribing a medical protocol.
Of course not.
But the through line connecting these 3 disparate physiological crises, immune collapse, nerve damage, and cardiovascular stroke, is undeniably captivating. It asks us to seriously reconsider the power of foundational, inexpensive biological support when used intelligently alongside traditional medicine.
And it highlights the profound, unpredictable power of shared human experience. That is the part I keep coming back to.
Oh, yeah.
That American visitor, whoever he was, probably never fully grasped the ripple effect of his crusade. He walked into a pharmacy in South Africa to talk about his immune system, and he had no idea he was planting a seed that would eventually help repair Osman's nerves and potentially safeguard Osman's mother from a secondary stroke years later.
It's amazing.
That is the true, chaotic beauty of word-of-mouth health discovery.
Information, when shared with genuine conviction, can alter the trajectory of lives completely removed from the original source.
Absolutely. I want to sincerely thank the creator of our source material today, Osman, the blind Muslim yogi, who openly shared this deeply personal family history.
Yes, thank you, Osman.
And for context, while he's been practicing these disciplines for decades, he actually lost his sight quite recently in May of 2023. If you want to explore his philosophy further or check out his free 5-minute yoga and meditation program, you can find his resources at his platform, yogawellness786.com. Thank you to you, our listeners, for bringing your curiosity to this deep dive today.
As we conclude, I want to leave you with a lingering thought to carry with you. We've spent the last hour dissecting how a chance encounter regarding a basic, incredibly cheap mineral fundamentally altered the health trajectory of an entire family.
Really did.
It forces a deeply personal question. Look around your own environment. What incredibly simple, deeply inexpensive, completely overlooked miracle might be sitting quietly on a shelf in your life right now, just waiting for you to have the open-minded curiosity to discover it?